Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next podcast, which is a little bit different to what we've done in the past. But I tell you what, it's going to be a great learning curve for everybody, including you and I, Mark. I'm sure of that.
Absolutely. I've actually been looking forward to this one more than some of the others that we've had because our guest, Tony McManus, I've known off and on over the years. And we just said to each other, haven't seen each other for a long while. But I've got enormous respect for Tony and the work that he does. And it's a pleasure to have him here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Oh, first of all, welcome, Tony.
G'day, gents. Very privileged to come and have a chat with you, esteemed gentlemen. So looking forward to what unfolds because it's unscripted. That's great. We'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, well, overall, it really the topic will be primarily about mental health, and mental health applies to all of us, not only in our workplace and to our employees, but also to our family lives. And it's been, I guess, really brought to the fore following the 2 years of lockdowns that has changed the environment in which everybody in Victoria in particular, I know, has lived through. So I guess the first question for you, Tony, is that we'll start at the beginning. This is normally Mark's question, but I'll finish it.
No, that's all right.
We'll start at the beginning and tell us about your early life on this earth. And where did you come from?
Very early. I was born in Highton, Mount Pleasant Road. The whole old house is still there. Back in those days, Dad had just finished up working at the Geelong Advertiser as a linotype operator, which is a non-existent trade nowadays. And after he left the Addy, Mum and Dad took on a milk bar in Latrobe Terrace, just near the footy ground where there's a 7-Eleven now. Then after being there for a couple of years, in their wisdom, they moved out to Lara and took on a corner milk bar there. And we become pretty well embedded in the Lara community. And then after a while, they had a supermarket there, eventually sold that supermarket and milk bar, and they had an old corner site that used to be a milk bar that an estate agent came down from Werribee, tapped Dad on the shoulder and said, I think this will make a pretty good location for a real estate office. And one thing led to another, and they finished up supermarketing and milk barring and becoming the first estate agents in Lara. So from school, Lara Lake Primary School, then the old Chanel College. That only went to Form 4 back in those days, so I ended up moving across to St Joey's in Newtown for my year 11 and 12. And I can't say I starred. I think I got something like 2 C's and 3 D's, including 53% for English. So having done the old HSC, that was it. I had no intention of going back to school.
Sorry, Tony, you beat me in English by 1 mark.
Oh, there you go. And so I landed, most of my mates ended up with jobs in banks. I ended up at the State Electricity Commission of Victoria, and I was a junior clerk at the old Newport Power Station, which is a fascinating introduction to the workforce with the all the tradies from the western suburbs. And what was particularly interesting at the Newport Power Station was it was 1981. Back then, there was actually a electricity crisis, like we're kind of getting used to nowadays. Back then, the old Newport Power Station was being decommissioned. That's where I was actually working. But the new Newport Power Station was was coming online. And just to see the contrast between the old that cranked out about 110 megawatts of power and about 1,100 staff compared to the new station, messy too, of briquettes and all that kind of stuff. The new power station, gas or oil-fired, 100 staff that cranked out about 5 times the output. So just to see the old redundant, the new modern, clean, efficient. Also, it was a bit of a union issue. I had to walk through picket lines at times to get to work. So that was my initial working career. And then I started, after 12 months in the workforce at the SEC, I had drummed into me, well, that plan of never going back to school, you better put that on the shelf because you need to study to kick on. So that led to me living in Lara, going to Deakin 2 nights a week and commuting into Melbourne. So it was a bit of a long haul to do all that. So after a few years of that, I rationalised things and moved from Deakin to RMIT. moved from Lara to North Melbourne. And I must say I had some of the best years of my life living in a uni house in North Melbourne.
What did you do at Deakin? What was
it was Deakin was commerce, but then when I transferred to RMIT, it became an accounting degree. Cool. So ended up with an accounting qualification. Whilst I was at RMIT, I came across an organisation called ISEC, AIESEC, which is an acronym for the International Society of Economics and Commerce students. And I ended up engaging in a program where we swapped jobs in different countries for graduates. And because I raised a few jobs for people from overseas to come to Melbourne, that gave me a credit to go into the system. And I ended up at Deloitte Haskins and Sells at Edinburgh in Scotland.
Fantastic.
And I went there for a one-way ticket because I knew there was a bit of an expectation of coming back to the family business, but I was kind of trying to put it off for as long as possible. And I think the fact that I went for a one-way ticket was probably a bit of a message there.
It was subtle, was it?
But
you're lucky to get through the passport office when you got to the airport with a one-way ticket.
Yeah, I think, well, maybe because I had a working visa and all that kind of stuff for the first 12 months. So I loved it. The experience of being based in Edinburgh and being able to spend my weekends travelling over northern England and around Scotland, I've got memories I'll never forgot. And I've been back there a few times since. And but then my girlfriend at the time from RMIT started writing me letters and announced that she was coming over to visit to me, which kind of caught me a bit on the hop. And I cut a long story short, she came and visited. We backpacked around Europe. My indefinite plan of being overseas became rapidly shortened, and I came back and married her. So things just seemed to line up. The right girl, come back to get into the family business. And so that's kind of the early days.
So you ended up as a real estate agent, in theory, running the business in Lara.
Yep. Working for my parents. Yeah.
Working with your parents. Now, I'm just going to jump way forward from there for a minute, because right now you are a very well-known ambassador for Beyond Blue.
Yep.
I know you go around to organisations and talk about depression and mental health issues, and you go to some of the CEO forum groups and talk, such as Tech, which I used to be a chair of one of their groups, and offer this service, and it's all based on your own experience. So can we just jump back to the real estate agent and what led to that?
Sure.
Where you are today?
Yeah. Well, probably after being in real estate for 15 years, about 15 years, I'd purchased the business off my parents. And when you throw a family business into the equation, you would have seen, obviously, built over the years, it can be a lot of interesting variables. And I kind of describe my life in the family business as Partridge family one day, but Manson family the next day. In terms of just, stuff happens, and we didn't have structure, and having brought the business off the parents, they kind of felt that the way they ran it was the way it should keep running.
Sorry, they sold it physically, but they never sold it mentally.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, they actually lived above the office, so they would come down and visit, and Mum could never understand why my wife didn't want to work in the business like she worked in the business. So that's just say my wife didn't have the best relationship with her mother-in-law, if I could delicately put it that way.
Well, guess what? I think a few of us have been in that situation, and it'll never change. And in fact, just quickly, that's why I'm a family business consultant, because I went through a very similar exercise and knew that families needed help. Anyway, sorry, go on.
I think if I could have tapped into the skill sets of people like yourself back then, I would have a completely different trajectory in life. But I kind of stumbled on by myself. So after being in there, working for Mum and Dad for 7 years, then I brought the business off them. And another thing that kind of happened at the time is, well, how are we going to do this? And one option was a committee of 5 kids run the business. And I was a bit underwhelmed because only 2 of us had worked in the business then. Then option 2 was I go 50-50 with my brother who'd never worked in real estate before. Bit underwhelmed about that too. So eventually logic prevailed, and I just brought it outright. But part of the deal, not in writing, was that I gave my brother a job. Roll on 10 years later, he one Sunday morning, we've been working together for 10 years. He took his own life, and that had a huge impact in terms of the ripple effect on our immediate family, our staff, the local community, and it was quite challenging. And what I didn't really share at the time, but I'll kind of share a bit now, is that he took his own life, but I was very suicidal myself. But obviously I survived. But I felt I couldn't talk about it to immediate family because I didn't want to rattle their cage after what happened to him. So I kind of got through by making sure I was talking to my doctor, psychologist, and really good mates got me through as someone to talk to because I just couldn't talk about stuff with the family. So off the back of losing Mick, it was at his funeral that his wife suggested that we should support organisations like Beyond Blue. I'd heard about them, didn't know much about them, so I did a bit of research and found they were all about increasing awareness and reducing stigma. So I thought, well, with my marketing skills from real estate, I could do something there. So I went and had a chat with Frank Costa and said, Frank, why don't we get Geelong Football Club to play against another team in an AFL Beyond Blue Cup? Frank was all over it, and no prizes for guessing who we picked on for the other team. Do you recall?
No.
Hawthorn.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Someone whose initials are Jeffrey Kennett.
Jeff Kennett,
was the chairman of Hawthorn, chairman of Beyond Blue.
Yeah.
So Frank got me in front of Jeff, and people talk about being jeffed. I got jeffed because the meeting up in Richmond at Jeff's place was all he knew was that Frank Costa was turning up for a meeting. Frank's fantastic long-term assistant Andrew Barlam rang me and said, can you go in and open up the batting with Jeff because Frank's running late, which apparently that was Frank always ran late. So I go in, knock on the door, introduce myself, and I meet the great man, and I get, who are you? Where's Costa? I'm a busy man, blah, blah, blah. And so it kind of sat me on my tail a bit, but then I was so passionate about what I had to talk about, I said, well, this is why I'm here. And I said, I lost my brother, we want to do an AFL Beyond Blue Cup, and Frank eventually got there, and it got up and running. So it was huge. It's a huge thing for me to be able to do something positive in the aftermath of Mick's passing because I couldn't do anything about what he'd done. And that's kind of therapeutic in terms of helping you grieve and deal and move on because you're taking a positive out of a negative. And every time I speak, I know I'm helping other people. So the first forum we had at Geelong Football Club, over 300 people turned up. The idea was that before each AFL Beyond Blue Cup, there'd be a forum at the relevant club. Hawthorn and Geelong took it in turns. First time, 300 people turned up. We had guys like Gary McDonald. He was an ambassador. Wayne Schwartz come and spoke for the first time about his own mental health journey. Jeff spoke, and at the end of the night, rather than be a question and answer session, it became a storytelling, a story sharing session. And I'll never forget one lady got up and spoke about how she'd had electric shock treatment and how it helped her. So the message I took and the inspiration I took is that by storytelling, sharing your story, it reduces stigma, increases awareness. So that's kind of been a bit of a path ever since.
So thank you, Tony. Thank you for sharing that. And I knew bits of that, and I didn't know all of it. So very personal, and thank you for sharing. Where did you make the transition then to that's what you're going to be? That's going to be your career and.
Yeah, well, obviously after losing Mick, I really lost my passion, my mojo for the business, but I was kind of stuck with it. I had debt, I had responsibilities. I just thought I've got to keep going. But if you haven't got your passion or your energy, it basically was going into decline. So it's lucky I had some really loyal staff members who stood up a bit. And after a while, I eventually sold the business, probably 5 or 6 years later. It's back in 2012. But then, unfortunately, I was pretty well burnt out and needed to recover. And I said to my psychologist, "Well, what do I say? What do I do? I've had pretty bad symptoms." And that psychologist said, "Just tell people you take a long service leave." So I thought, that's fair enough. Just charge up after all those years in real estate. It's about 25 years. Then, unfortunately, I went through a divorce. So my long-term financial planning was totally stuffed. Had a fair asset base, but all of a sudden you've got to divide it in two, and that wasn't a simple process. So I was lost for a few years. Just I felt I struggled to work because I just dealing with the trials and tribulations of family law was not pleasant, and it's hard to work out what to do next because essentially I was out of work. I'd sold my business. All the equity from the business was in the bank, but under lock and key, I couldn't touch my equity because of the proceedings and the negotiations. So I thought I'll just try a bit more storytelling, and I knew I had a great story, but I didn't know how to get it to market. And the first gig I had was with a friend of a friend who was at National Australia Bank. And she gave me a commission to go to every capital city in Australia for the NAB and just do essentially the presentation that I'm still doing today that is just tweaked because the fundamental messages haven't changed over the years of what you need to do to look after yourself. And so that gave me a real, I thought, wow, how good is this? We're well paid, airfare, accommodation, travel around. So I thought that's not a bad lifestyle, but it wasn't regular. It was occasional. So after a few years, in terms of some of the different things I tried, back in 2014, I can't believe I did it now, but I actually ran for Parliament. So I took on the state seat of Lara against John Aaron.
Good luck.
In a 70% Labor area. So as a Liberal candidate, I had no illusions that I was going to win, but my motive was to try and reduce the margin. But the reality is, I don't know how much I should say, but let's say the Liberals weren't all that well organised, and whether it's Liberal or Labor, if it's a safe seat, they just forget it. So I went in wanting to have a crack, but I had no support. So I realised that pretty early in the piece. So I pretty well ran as a lame duck in the end, but maintained the margin. I didn't lose anything. So that was once bitten, twice shy. And the best thing that happened in 2014 was a girl I started dating in that year. She actually went door knocking around Corio and North Lane on my behalf as a candidate. So she's my 8-year partner now. So
excellent.
We got off to a great start. I thought
Well,
she was a keeper if she's prepared to do that stuff.
You never know how life turns out. Now, Mark and I, Mark talks about sliding doors and I talk about tipping points. So what was the tipping point where do you believe you actually turn the corner on your own mental health? Or has it still linger?
Oh, yeah, look, it's something you've got to constantly maintain it. The two significant things for me were getting out of a business that I didn't really want to be in, so real estate, and also the first relationship. It unfortunately, towards the end, it was fairly toxic, and I think those two factors were significant things that were draining me. So out of the work that I didn't particularly like doing, and when I was in Lara in real estate still, one of the things that really stimulated me was getting involved in establishing the Bendigo Community Bank out there. And it's funny how with the passage of time, I saw how good that community enterprise was. And then about 4 years ago, I saw a job come up at the Geelong Community Foundation, which is a similar kind of sustainable organisation that's putting back into the community. And I think what I was trying to achieve as a political candidate to help the northern suburbs, I'm kind of getting able to do that now through the work I do at the Geelong Community Foundation and what we're doing through the Lara and District Community Bank. So I think fundamentally, the preferred work for me is helping others. And it doesn't pay as much as real estate, but now with a better look at balance, I still kept a few assets from my previous situation. I don't have to go out and earn a lot nowadays, so I can take a bit of a hit on income, but then also the work I'm doing is actually very stimulating, and it helps. It's actually a mental health thing where I use this phrase: the best exercise that you can do is to help somebody else who's down to get up. And that's my call to action to my niche in mental health, which I would describe as tackling the problem of isolation, loneliness and disconnection, which is obviously a huge focus in the last few years, with the solution of social connection through volunteering and mentoring. And it could be as simple as one of the things I've done is got involved in the number 2P, L to P learner driving program. So that's a program where you help kids whose parents don't have a car or parents don't drive get their P plates. So you spend 100 hours in Carlton. So it also evolves into a mentoring situation. So I found I really enjoyed that, and that probably segues a bit nicely into the importance of social connection and volunteering. You can actually have a lot of fun with it too. I've been through my involvement in Rotary Central Australia, Aboriginal communities, Papua New Guinea, been there 3 times. Last time I went up there in 2019, we were volunteering at the Popondetta Secondary School, but the reason I picked Popondetta is I knew that was only 80 kilometres from Kokoda. So I was able to get a day off and hitch a ride up to Kokoda. Big tick off my bucket list. So 2 weeks of work, but also a couple of days of going to Kokoda and also going to Buna and Gona, where the Japanese originally landed and were pushed off the beach. So I kind of share that story about a bit of tourism but volunteering stuff. If you combine the two, it's good. So it's still helping people but having a bit of fun yourself.
So the other thing that we've learnt about you this morning, Tony, when we were chatting just before we started recording, is you've got a couple of books that you feature in. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those 2 books? What's led to that?
Yeah, 2 books: Men in Their Sheds and Man Up, Man Down. With the profile I have as a community ambassador for Are You OK and also as a national ambassador for Beyond Blue, I kind of recognise the great work they do, but I also recognise through the work I do at the Geelong Community Foundation, there's a lot of local organisations who provide high impact on the ground support for our community. So there was a young fella who lived down at Queenscliff, and he's moved to Ocean Grove. Scott, I'm struggling with his surname. He'll kill me if he. Scotty. I won't even try and remember now because I'm putting pressure on. But Scott, he runs. His brand is the Travelling Alchemist, and part of he's really artistic. And he came up with the idea of helping guys deal with mental health issues by encouraging sharing of stories. So one of the books I'm in, Man Up, Man Down, Scott takes these incredible portraits of us with the old-fashioned cameras. It makes you look like a bushranger from the 1800s, but it's black and white, and what it brings out in the image is unbelievable. So each of these 50 guys have had their portrait taken, told the story of what went wrong with their mental health and how they got back on track. So I love those on-the-ground projects. And so 50 different guys, 50 different stories is going to, you could probably multiply it massively in terms of people who would relate to that storytelling and help with the destigmatising. The second book was Men's Shed Photography, and that was basically a bit of a celebration of the old man cave. And it was not grasped all that well by a major mental health organisation, because they thought, well, if you go in your man cave, you're isolating, and that's not good. But what we now know is that generally if you have a man cave, you share it with other people who might have similar stuff that you're interested in. But the other thing is this thing about self in terms of work-life balance that men often neglect. A man cave is all about my space, my place, my sense of identity. So it helps flush out that self thing that we referred to earlier. That most of the time I talk to a guy in the first instance, and what about you? You're talking about your family, your work, and everything else. What about you? And you go, what about me? They've got no idea. They don't stop and think or have. But in my perception, neglecting myself over the years was one of the reasons why I had a breakdown. So Jeff Kennedy explained it really well. And often my talks, I title them, Self First is Not Selfish. When I first heard that, I rejected it because I thought, nah. He said put yourself first, but I heard selfish. So the way Jeff explained it was, if you're not firing on all cylinders yourself with all the other things, if you're not firing on all cylinders yourself, all those other things that you're responsible for or accountable for, you're going to struggle to maintain. So by being totally happy within yourself, it keeps your energy levels up. You're not regretting not doing something, and it becomes a bit of a way of switching off from the pressures of work. So when people say, "Well, what do I do in the self thing?" Well, I say, "Well, create a bucket list, and everything that's on your bucket list, share it with people around you." And just for the benefit of the listeners here, I'm showing Bill and Mark my current bucket list, and you can see the old combi van in that corner there. Well, my daughters knew that was on my bucket list. So last Christmas, they gave me a voucher to hire a combi for the weekend. So point is, if you share what's on your bucket list, you might also come across other people who've got similar interests.
That's an excellent idea, Tony. Now, just quickly, I've got one last question before Mark has got his. Is your advice to business owners who are listening to this podcast and they've got some, I guess, hidden issues that they're hiding in the background? What's your advice for them? What's the first step they should take?
You've got a few options. If you're kind of alluding to something that might be causing them a bit of anguish or grief, you've got to get it off your chest. So it doesn't really matter who you talk to. Generally, the first port of call is talk to your GP, and they open the door to access to things like mental health plans or referral to a psychologist. Some organisations have also what's called a EAP program, Employee Assistance Program, which is counsellors who are on retainer to have a chat to them. But then you can't underestimate the importance of just talking to your mates. And things like you referred to the tech group before or CEO Institute, they're a pretty good solution because you can put on the table in a safe environment where Chatham House rules apply whatever is troubling you. And I used to find when I was in the CEO Institute that often you weren't talking too much about technical stuff in your job. You're talking about managing staff, and which is probably one of the biggest headaches that people have.
Yeah, no, that's sound advice.
It is. I totally agree with that. Talk to your mates. So I've got two school mates. There's three, but one's overseas. But the two in particular, we've known each other for 45 years, and we get together at least once a year, and we'll go away to somewhere different.
Yep.
And we just we like a good wine, and we'll get a bottle of wine and a cheese platter, and we sit in that.
Yep.
And I'm going to use the word talk shit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's great.
Yeah.
And I look forward to it, and I know my two friends also look forward to it, because it's that talking, just talking to your friends and being open. So I totally get it, Tony. Totally.
All right, finally, look, Tony, Mark and I want to thank you very much for this and for opening up to us, because we both know this is a really important topic. We're out there mentoring businesses and working with business owners all the time. And it's interesting you talk about those groups, the tech group and all this. We'll have a future podcast where we'll talk about one that we're starting here in Geelong in the future. But look, I really appreciate it, and thank you for contacting us, because your message is so important. And if anybody out there has listened to this and has got a second thought, maybe I need to do something, or how do I get a start? How do they contact you?
Look, the simple thing is just give me a call, 0417 33 4434, or if you Google, you'll find me. You can get
so that's Tony McManus.
Yep.
How do you spell that? McManus.
And in terms of a lot of stuff I've done in mental health, if you Google search my name with depression or mental health, they'll throw up a lot of stuff. I've got my own website, McManus Consulting Services. And if you want to learn a bit more about supporting charities around Geelong, you can contact me at the Geelong Community Foundation.
Fantastic, Tony. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot. And I've got to ask you, how are you going today? How are you feeling today?
Yeah, good. Mildly anxious about being podcasted by you esteemed gentlemen. So I tackled that by going for a good walk this morning around Bacchus Marsh and a cup of coffee on the run.
We didn't know we're that scary.
And even though I do a lot of public speaking, there's always mild anxiety running up to it. But, you just make sure you're prepared. And, so I'd give myself an 8 out of 10 today.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for coming on board.
Thanks, Bill.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast, brought to you by Barwon Southwest Mentors. If you'd like to know more about how we can help your business, look at smeadvisory.com.au for contact details.